At my husband's funeral, I got a message. I am still alive. Trust no one. Can you imagine getting a message like that? From the person you just buried? It sounds impossible, doesn't it? But that's exactly what happened to me. And if you think that's scary, just wait until you hear what came next. If this story gives you chills, please like this video, share it with someone who loves mystery stories, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible true stories. My name is Margaret, and I'm 66 years old. Until 3 months ago, I lived the most peaceful life you could imagine. My husband Edward and I had been married for 42 beautiful years. We lived in a small, quiet town where everyone knew everyone and nothing exciting ever happened. That's exactly how we liked it. Edward was the most wonderful man you could ever meet. He had kind blue eyes that twinkled when he smiled, and he always smelled like the wood polish he used in his workshop. Every morning, he would make me coffee and kiss my forehead before heading to work. He fixed furniture for people in our town. Old chairs, broken tables, wobbly dressers. His hands could make anything beautiful again. "Margaret, my dear," he would say every single morning, "you make every day feel like Christmas morning." That was just the kind of man he was, always saying sweet things that made my heart feel warm. We didn't have much money, but we had each other. We would sit on our front porch every evening, holding hands and watching the sunset. Edward would tell me about the furniture he fixed that day, and I would tell him about my garden or the book I was reading. Simple things, but they made us happy. Our 2 sons, David and Michael, lived in the big city about 2 hours away. David was 38 and worked at some important office job. He was married to Sarah, a woman with fancy clothes and an attitude to match. Michael was 35 and always seemed to need money for something: a new business idea, a new apartment, a new car. But they were our sons, and we loved them. Then came that terrible day in June. Edward had been working late in his shop, fixing an old rocking chair for Mrs. Peterson down the street. I had made his favorite dinner, meatloaf with mashed potatoes, and was keeping it warm in the oven. 7 o'clock came and went. Then 8 o'clock. Edward was never late for dinner. I walked down to his workshop behind our house. The door was wide open, which was strange. Edward always closed the door when he worked with strong chemicals. Inside, I found him lying on the floor next to his workbench. His face was gray, and he wasn't breathing. The paramedics came quickly, but it was too late. They said it looked like an accident, that Edward had been using some kind of chemical stripper to clean the old rocking chair, and the fumes had been too much for his heart. "Sometimes it happens with older folks," the young paramedic said sadly. "The chemicals can be dangerous if you don't have good airflow." I was in shock. My Edward, my careful, cautious Edward, would never make such a mistake. He knew all about workshop safety. He had been fixing furniture for 30 years. But everyone said accidents happen, even to careful people. The next few days were a blur of sadness. David and Michael came home for the funeral. They seemed genuinely sad, hugging me and telling me how sorry they were. Sarah even bought me a black dress for the service, though she made it clear how much it cost. "We're here for you, Mom," David said, his arm around my shoulders. "We'll take care of everything." The funeral was small and quiet, just like Edward would have wanted. Father Martinez said beautiful words about Edward's good heart and skilled hands. Our neighbors filled the little church, all of them crying because everyone loved Edward. But then, right in the middle of Father Martinez's speech about Edward going to heaven, my phone buzzed. I almost ignored it. Who sends messages during a funeral? But something made me look. Maybe it was the way the phone seemed to buzz more urgently than usual. The message was from Edward's phone number. My heart stopped. I looked up at Edward's casket at the front of the church, then back at my phone. This had to be a mistake. Someone must have gotten Edward's old phone by accident. But when I read the message, my whole world turned upside down. "Margaret, it's me. I am still alive. Trust no one, especially not David and Michael. Go to the workshop. Look under the loose floorboard by the window. I left something for you. Be very careful. They killed me, and you might be next." I stared at the phone, my hands shaking so hard I almost dropped it. This couldn't be real. Edward was right there in that wooden box. I had seen his gray face. I had touched his cold hand. But the message was definitely from his phone. And it knew things only Edward would know, like the loose floorboard by the workshop window that he kept meaning to fix. I looked around the church. David was sitting to my left, dabbing his eyes with a tissue. Michael was on my right, his arm around Sarah. They both looked so sad, so innocent. Could this message be real? Was Edward somehow still alive? Or was someone playing a cruel joke on a grieving old woman? And if the message was real, if my own sons had killed their father, what did that mean for me? The rest of the funeral passed like a bad dream. I kept looking at David and Michael, trying to see something different in their faces. Were they really mourning their father? Or were they just good actors? When we got back to the house, everyone wanted to comfort me. Neighbors brought casseroles and cookies. David and Michael talked about practical matters, selling the house, moving me somewhere safer, managing Edward's workshop and tools. "Mom, you can't live here alone," Michael said, sitting too close to me on the couch. "It's not safe. What if something happens to you?" "We've been looking at some really nice places," Sarah added, her voice sweet but her eyes cold. "Retirement communities where you'd have friends and activities. You'd love it." But all I could think about was that message. Edward's message, warning me not to trust them. That night, after everyone left, I sat alone in our empty house. Edward's coffee cup was still in the sink from 3 days ago. I couldn't bring myself to wash it. I kept staring at the message on my phone, reading it over and over again. If Edward was really trying to warn me, then I had to be brave. I had to find out what he left in the workshop. But what if it was true? What if my own sons had killed their father? And what if I was next? That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Edward's message on my phone. Trust no one, especially not David and Michael. How could a mother not trust her own sons? It felt like my heart was being ripped in half. But I had to know the truth. At 3 in the morning, when the whole world was quiet and dark, I put on my robe and slippers and crept out to Edward's workshop. The workshop still smelled like wood polish and paint. All of Edward's tools hung neatly on the wall, just the way he liked them. For a moment, I could almost pretend he would walk through that door any minute, humming his favorite song. I found the loose floorboard by the window. Edward had stepped on it funny just last month, and it had started creaking. "I'll fix that tomorrow," he had said. But tomorrow never came. I pried up the board with a screwdriver. Underneath was a small metal box, the kind Edward used to store important papers. Inside the box, I found things that made my blood run cold. There were photographs of David and Michael meeting with strangers in dark alleys. There were papers showing they owed money to dangerous people, gambling debts, loan sharks, people who hurt you if you don't pay. And there was a letter in Edward's handwriting. "My dearest Margaret, if you are reading this, then something terrible has happened to me. I discovered our sons are in serious trouble with bad people who want their money. They asked me for $40,000 last month. When I said no, David got angry and said I would be sorry. I think they might try to hurt me to get my life insurance money. I hired a private detective named Sam Wilson. His number is 555-0147. If anything happens to me, call him. I love you always. Edward." My hands were shaking so hard I could barely read the letter. Edward had known. He had known they were planning something terrible, and he had tried to protect me. The next morning, David and Michael came over for breakfast, just like they had every day since the funeral. But now, everything felt different. When David hugged me, I felt scared instead of comforted. When Michael smiled at me, I wondered what he was really thinking. "Mom, we need to talk about your future," David said, sitting at our kitchen table like he owned it. "You can't stay here alone. It's not safe." "I'm fine here," I said quietly. "This is my home." Sarah laughed, but it wasn't a nice laugh. "Margaret, look around. This place is falling apart. The roof leaks, the stairs creak, and there's no security. What if someone breaks in? What if you fall and no one finds you for days?" "We found the perfect place for you," Michael added. "Sunny Meadows Retirement Community. They have activities, nurses on staff, meals prepared for you. You'd never be lonely." But I had heard about places like Sunny Meadows. Once you moved in, you had to sign papers giving your family control of all your money. You couldn't leave without permission. It was like a fancy prison. I don't want to move, I said, trying to sound stronger than I felt. David's face changed. For just a second, I saw something mean in his eyes. Mom, you're not thinking clearly. The grief is making you confused. Maybe you need to see a doctor. A doctor who specializes in helping older people make good decisions, Sarah added with that fake sweet smile. I realized what they were doing. They wanted to have me declared mentally unfit so they could take control of everything. The house, Edward's workshop, his life insurance money, everything we had worked for our whole lives. I need some air, I said, standing up quickly. We'll come with you, Michael said, but I was already heading for the door.
No.
I need to be alone right now. I walked to the park where Edward and I used to feed the ducks. My mind was racing. If Edward's letter was true, if he really had hired a private detective, then maybe I could get help. I called the number from a payphone at the park. Yes, an old payphone. I didn't want David and Michael tracking my cell phone calls. Wilson Investigations. A deep voice answered. This is Margaret Hayes. I think my husband Edward hired you before he died. There was a long pause. Mrs. Hayes, I've been waiting for your call. Can you meet me somewhere private? Somewhere your sons won't see you. My heart started beating fast. You know about David and Michael? I know a lot of things, Mrs. Hayes. And none of it is good. Meet me at Murphy's Diner on Oak Street at 2 o'clock. Come alone, and make sure no one follows you. The next few hours felt like the longest of my life. I had to pretend everything was normal when David and Michael came back. I had to smile and nod when Sarah talked about retirement community brochures. I had to act like a confused old woman who needed their help. But inside, I was planning. At 1:30, I told them I needed to buy groceries. I'll drive you, Michael offered immediately. No, thank you. The walk will do me good. Mom, you shouldn't be walking alone. What if you get confused and lost? I've lived in this town for 42 years, Michael. I think I can find the grocery store. David and Michael looked at each other. I could see them having a silent conversation with their eyes. Finally, Michael nodded. Okay, but take your cell phone. Call us if you need anything. Instead of going to the grocery store, I walked the long way to Murphy's Diner. I kept looking over my shoulder, but I didn't see anyone following me. Sam Wilson was exactly what you'd expect a private detective to look like. Tall, serious, with kind eyes that had seen too many sad things. He was sitting in a back booth drinking coffee. Mrs. Hayes? He stood up when I walked over. I'm sorry for your loss. Edward was a good man. Did he really hire you? I asked, sliding into the booth across from him. Sam nodded and pulled out a thick folder. 3 weeks before he died. He was worried about David and Michael's gambling debts and some threatening phone calls they'd been getting. He also noticed strange activity in your joint bank account. He showed me papers that made my stomach hurt. David and Michael had been stealing money from our account for months. Small amounts at first, $50 here, $100 there. But in the last month, they had taken over $3,000. Edward had me following your sons, Sam continued. They were meeting with loan sharks, people who break legs when you don't pay. David owes $15,000. Michael owes $22,000. And they were both borrowing money to gamble more, trying to win enough to pay back what they already owed. But Edward's life insurance. I started to say. $100,000, Sam finished. Split between David and Michael if something happened to both you and Edward. But if Edward died and you were declared mentally incompetent, they would control everything. The pieces of the puzzle were coming together, and the picture they made was horrible. Sam, I whispered, do you think they really killed Edward? Sam's face was grim. Mrs. Hayes, your husband didn't die from chemical fumes. I have a friend who works at the medical examiner's office. Edward was poisoned with methanol, wood alcohol. Someone put it in his coffee that evening. The room started spinning. My sweet Edward, murdered by his own sons for money. How could anyone be so evil? There's more, Sam said gently. Edward recorded some conversations with David and Michael using a hidden device in his workshop. Would you like to hear them? I nodded. even though I was scared of what I might learn. Sam played a recording on a small device. I heard David's voice, angry and desperate. Dad, we need that money now. These people don't wait. They'll hurt us, and then they'll come after you and Mom. Then Edward's voice, calm and sad. Son, I don't have $40,000. And even if I did, giving it to you won't solve your gambling problem. You need help. We don't need help. Michael's voice, nastier than I'd ever heard it. We need money. And if something happened to you, Mom would get your life insurance. She's getting old anyway. She might not even notice if we helped her make some bad decisions. My blood turned to ice. They were talking about killing both of us. Edward's voice on the recording was firm. If you hurt Margaret, if you even think about hurting Margaret, I'll make sure you never see a penny of anything we've worked for. David laughed, a cold, mean laugh. Dad, you're 68 years old. You can't stop us from doing anything. Maybe it's time for you to have an accident in that workshop of yours. The recording ended. Sam and I sat in silence for a long moment. Mrs. Hayes, Sam said finally, your sons are planning to kill you. Probably very soon. We need to get you somewhere safe and call the police. But I surprised him. Instead of crying or fainting like an old lady might do, I felt something strong and angry growing inside me. No, I said firmly. We're going to catch them. We're going to make them pay for what they did to Edward. And we're going to make sure they never hurt anyone else. Sam smiled for the first time since I'd met him. Mrs. Hayes, I think your husband would be very proud of you right now. As I walked home from the diner, I felt different. Scared, yes, but also determined. David and Michael thought I was just a helpless old woman they could push around. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The next morning, I woke up with a mission. Edward had been murdered, and I was going to prove it. But I had to be very careful. David and Michael couldn't know what I was planning. I made breakfast and smiled when they came over, acting like the confused old woman they wanted me to be. Good morning, boys, I said sweetly. I was thinking about what you said yesterday. Maybe you're right about Sunny Meadows. David and Michael looked at each other with excitement. They thought they had won. That's wonderful, Mom, David said, patting my hand like I was a child. We can drive up there this afternoon and take a tour. Actually, I'd like to spend one more day in the house, just to say goodbye properly. Could we go tomorrow instead? Of course, Michael said. Take all the time you need. But what they didn't know was that I was buying time to gather evidence with Sam. As soon as they left, I called Sam from the payphone at the park. I need to learn everything about how Edward really died, I told him. Meet me at the library at 10 o'clock, Sam said. We have work to do. The library was perfect because it was public but quiet. Sam had brought a laptop and a box full of papers. We sat at a table in the back corner, away from everyone else. First, let's talk about the methanol, Sam said quietly. It's wood alcohol, and it's deadly. Just 2 ounces can kill a grown man. Your husband would have felt dizzy and sick, then passed out. He probably thought he was having a heart attack. My hands clenched into fists. Poor Edward, dying scared and alone while his sons celebrated getting their inheritance. Where would David and Michael get methanol? I asked. Sam showed me printouts from the internet. It's used in racing car fuel and some industrial cleaners. But here's the interesting part. Michael's friend Tony works at an auto parts store that sells racing supplies. I have receipts showing Michael bought 2 bottles of methanol 3 days before Edward died. Can we prove Michael gave it to Edward? That's where it gets tricky. But Edward recorded more conversations than I played for you yesterday. Want to hear them? I nodded, even though my heart was already breaking. Sam played another recording. This time it was Michael's voice, fake friendly. Hey, Dad, I brought you some of that special coffee you like. The expensive kind from the city. Edward's voice. That's thoughtful, son. Thank you. I put extra sugar in it, just how you like it. There was silence, then Edward's voice weaker. This coffee tastes strange, Michael. Almost sweet, but bitter at the same time. It's a new flavor. Just drink it, Dad. It's good for you. My stomach felt sick. Michael had put the methanol in Edward's coffee, then stayed to watch him die. "There's more," Sam said grimly. He played the next part of the recording. Edward's voice, getting weaker. "I feel dizzy. Something's wrong." Michael's voice, cold now. "Yeah, Dad. Something is very wrong. You should have just given us the money when we asked nicely." "Michael, what did you do?" "What we had to do." "Don't worry, Dad. Mom won't suffer long either. We'll make sure she has an accident too, after she signs the house over to us." Then there was a sound like someone falling, and Edward's voice, barely a whisper. "Margaret. Have to warn Margaret." The recording ended. I was crying so hard I could barely breathe. My sweet Edward, trying to protect me even as he was dying. "Mrs. Hayes," Sam said gently, "I know this is horrible, but this recording proves Michael murdered your husband. We have evidence." "What about David? Was he there too?" Sam nodded and pulled out more papers. "David was the mastermind. He planned everything. Look at these bank records." The papers showed that David had been stealing from our account for 6 months. But 3 weeks before Edward died, David had made a huge withdrawal, $5,000. "What was the money for?" I asked. "I think he used it to pay someone to help cover up the murder. Look at this." Sam showed me another paper. Dr. Russell Mitchell, the doctor who signed Edward's death certificate, deposited exactly $5,000 into his account the day after Edward died. My mouth fell open. The doctor was part of it? Dr. Mitchell has gambling debts too. David found out about them and offered him money to write that Edward died of a heart attack caused by chemical fumes. No autopsy needed. The evil was deeper than I had imagined. My sons hadn't just killed their father, they had paid a doctor to lie about it. "Sam, what do we do now?" "We need more evidence. And we need to keep you safe. Your sons think you're going to sign over the house tomorrow. When you don't, they might try to hurt you." That afternoon, I went home and acted normal while David and Michael made plans for our trip to Sunny Meadows. But I was secretly packing important papers in a small bag and hiding it in the garden shed. That evening, Sam called while David and Michael were out buying dinner. "Mrs. Hayes, I have bad news and good news. Which do you want first?" "The bad news. I found out what David and Michael are really planning for tomorrow. They're not taking you to a retirement home. They're taking you to see Dr. Mitchell. He's going to say you're having mental problems and need to be put in a special hospital where they control all your decisions." My heart sank. "And the good news? Officer Rodriguez from the police department is Edward's cousin. He believes us, and he wants to help. We're going to set a trap." "What kind of trap?" "Tomorrow, you're going to wear a tiny recording device. When David and Michael try to force you to sign papers or threaten you, we'll have proof. Officer Rodriguez and his team will be waiting nearby." I felt scared but also excited. Finally, we were going to catch them. "There's one more thing," Sam said. "We need to get Edward's body examined by a real medical expert. The police can order an exhumation, digging up the grave, to test for methanol. But it means disturbing Edward's rest." I finished sadly. "Mrs. Hayes, Edward's spirit won't rest until his murderers are caught. I think he'd want us to do whatever it takes." That night, I sat in Edward's workshop, surrounded by his tools and his smell. I could almost feel him there with me. "Edward," I whispered, "I'm going to get justice for you. I'm going to make sure David and Michael pay for what they did. But I'm scared. What if something goes wrong? What if they hurt me before the police can stop them?" The wind chimes on the workshop porch rang softly, even though there was no wind. It sounded almost like Edward's voice saying, "Be brave, my dear Margaret. Be brave." The next morning came too quickly. David and Michael arrived early, both dressed in nice clothes like they were going to church. "Ready for your big day, Mom?" David asked, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. "We're so excited to get you settled somewhere safe," Michael added. I had the tiny recording device hidden under my blouse. Sam had shown me how to turn it on by pressing a small button. Officer Rodriguez and his team were parked 3 blocks away, waiting for my signal. "Before we go," I said carefully, "I want to understand something. Why are you so eager to get me out of this house?" David and Michael looked at each other. Sarah, who had come along to help, stepped forward. Margaret, you're not capable of making good decisions anymore. Yesterday, you went for a walk and came back 3 hours later. You could have gotten lost or hurt. I went to the park to think about Edward, I said. See, Michael said. You're living in the past. It's not healthy. I pressed the button to start recording. Boys, I need to ask you something, and I want honest answers. Did you kill your father? The room went completely silent. David's face turned red, and Michael stepped closer to me. Mom, that's a crazy thing to say. Dad died in an accident. Did you put methanol in his coffee? David's eyes went wide. Where did you hear that word? Did you pay Dr. Mitchell to lie about the cause of death? Now Michael grabbed my arm, hard enough to hurt. Mom, you need to stop talking crazy. People might think you're losing your mind. Am I losing my mind, Michael? Or did you murder your father for his insurance money? David exploded. Shut up. You don't know anything, you stupid old woman. Dad was never going to give us that money. He was going to let us get killed by loan sharks. We did what we had to do. And now we're going to do what we have to do with you, Michael snarled. Dr. Mitchell is going to say you're mentally ill. Then we'll put you somewhere where you can't cause any more trouble. Sarah laughed her mean laugh. And if you try to fight us, well, accidents happen to confused old ladies all the time. I had heard enough. These weren't my sons anymore. They were monsters. I pressed the emergency button on the recording device, Sam's signal to call the police. You killed Edward, I said clearly, making sure the recorder caught every word. You put poison in his coffee and watched him die. Then you paid a doctor to cover it up. And now you want to kill me too. David lunged toward me, his face twisted with rage. You're not going to ruin this for us. But before he could reach me, the front door burst open. Police. Everyone on the ground now. Officer Rodriguez and 4 other officers rushed into the room with their guns drawn. David, Michael, and Sarah froze like statues. Margaret Hayes. Officer Rodriguez said calmly, Are you hurt? No, I said, my voice shaking but strong. But I have a recording you need to hear. As the police handcuffed my sons and daughter-in-law, I felt something I hadn't felt since Edward died. Hope. The truth was finally coming out. The next few weeks felt like a whirlwind. David, Michael, and Sarah were locked up in jail, but I knew they would try to get out. Rich people with fancy lawyers always seemed to find ways to escape punishment. But Sam and Officer Rodriguez weren't going to let that happen. Mrs. Hayes, Officer Rodriguez said when he came to check on me, we need your permission to exhume Edward's body. It's the only way to prove he was poisoned. The thought of digging up Edward's grave made my heart ache. But I knew it was the only way to get real justice. Do it, I said firmly. Edward would want the truth to come out. 3 days later, they dug up Edward's casket in the early morning, before anyone else was in the cemetery. I wasn't there. Sam said it would be too hard for me to watch. But I sat in my kitchen, drinking Edward's favorite coffee, and I could feel him with me. We're going to get them, my love, I whispered to his empty chair. We're going to make sure they never hurt anyone else. The results came back from the medical examiner 2 weeks later. Officer Rodriguez delivered the news himself. Mrs. Hayes, Edward's body had enough methanol in it to kill 3 grown men. There's no doubt he was murdered. And we found something else, methanol traces in an old coffee mug from his workshop. The one with the chip on the handle that you said he always used. I started crying, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief. Now everyone would know that Edward didn't die in an accident. He was murdered by his own sons. What happens now? I asked. Now we go to trial. And Mrs. Hayes, with your recording and this evidence, those 3 are going to prison for a very long time. But David and Michael weren't going down without a fight. They hired the most expensive lawyer in the state, a man named Mr. Blackwood who wore $1,000 suits and had never lost a murder case. At the first court hearing, Mr. Blackwood stood up and pointed at me like I was the criminal. Your Honor, my clients are innocent young men being accused by a confused elderly woman who is clearly suffering from grief-induced delusions. Mrs. Hayes claims she received text messages from her dead husband. She believes her loving sons, who have cared for her devotedly, are somehow part of an elaborate murder plot. This is clearly the fantasy of a mind that has been damaged by loss and age. I felt my face turn red with anger. But Sam squeezed my hand and whispered, "Let him talk. We have evidence he can't argue with." The prosecutor, a tough woman named Miss Chen, stood up next. "Your Honor, we have recorded confessions, medical evidence of poisoning, and financial records showing motive and opportunity. This isn't the fantasy of a grieving widow. This is cold-blooded murder for money." The judge, an older man with kind eyes like Edward's, listened carefully to both sides. "We will proceed to trial," he said finally. "The evidence will speak for itself." The trial started 3 months later. The courtroom was packed with people from our town, neighbors who had loved Edward, friends who couldn't believe his sons had killed him. On the first day, Miss Chen played the recordings of Michael poisoning Edward and David planning the whole thing. You could hear people in the courtroom gasp when they heard Michael say, "Don't worry, Dad. Mom won't suffer long either." David and Michael sat at the defendant's table in their fancy suits, trying to look innocent. But everyone could see the truth in their cold eyes. Dr. Mitchell was the first witness, Ms. Chen called. The crooked doctor looked scared and sweaty as he walked to the witness stand. "Dr. Mitchell," Ms. Chen said, "did you falsify Edward Hayes' death certificate?" Dr. Mitchell's voice was barely a whisper. "Yes." "Why?" "David Hayes paid me $5,000 to say Edward died of a heart attack caused by chemical fumes. He said no one would ever know the difference." "But you knew Edward had been poisoned with methanol?" "Yes. The symptoms were obvious. But I needed the money. I have gambling debts, and David said he'd tell everyone about them if I didn't help him." The courtroom erupted in angry voices. The judge had to bang his gavel to restore order. Next, Sam took the witness stand and explained how Edward had hired him because he was afraid of his sons. Edward Hayes was a careful, loving man who suspected his sons were planning to hurt him and his wife for money, Sam testified. He recorded conversations and gathered evidence because he wanted to protect Margaret. Even facing death, his only concern was keeping his wife safe. Then it was my turn to testify. I was so nervous my hands were shaking, but I thought about Edward's courage and found my strength. Ms. Chen asked me to tell the court about the day Edward died. "Edward never came home for dinner," I said clearly. "He was always home by 6:30. When I found him in the workshop, he was lying on the floor. His face was gray, and there was a coffee mug beside him, the one with the chip that he loved. It still smelled sweet, like someone had put extra sugar in it." "What happened after Edward's death?" "David and Michael immediately started pushing me to sell the house and move to a retirement home. They said I was too old and confused to live alone. But I wasn't confused. I was scared because I had gotten a text message warning me not to trust them." Mr. Blackwood jumped up. "Objection. The defendant claims to have received messages from a dead man." "Your Honor," Ms. Chen said calmly, "the text message came from Edward's phone, which we found hidden in his workshop with the recording device. Edward had sent that message to his wife before he died, using a delayed send feature. He was trying to warn her from beyond the grave." The judge allowed me to continue. "I told the court about finding Edward's evidence box, meeting Sam, and recording my son's confession. When I asked them directly if they had killed their father, I said, David screamed that Edward deserved to die because he wouldn't give them money for their gambling debts. Michael said they were going to get rid of me too, just like they got rid of Edward." The courtroom was dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. Mr. Blackwood tried his best to make me look confused and unreliable. But every time he asked me a question, I had a clear, strong answer. "Mrs. Hayes, isn't it true that grief has affected your memory?" "My memory is fine, Mr. Blackwood. I remember every detail of the day my husband was murdered." "Isn't it possible you misunderstood what your sons were saying?" "There's no misunderstanding cold-blooded murder, sir." The trial lasted 2 weeks. Every day, more evidence came out about David and Michael's gambling debts, their desperate need for money, and their cruel plan to kill both their parents. The most shocking moment came when the prosecutor revealed that David and Michael had actually increased Edward's life insurance policy 6 months before they killed him, from $50,000 to $100,000. They didn't just decide to murder their father on a whim, Ms. Chin told the jury. They planned this for months. They saw their parents as nothing more than money in the bank. On the last day of the trial, Ms. Chin gave a speech that made everyone in the courtroom cry. Edward Hayes was a simple man who worked with his hands and loved his family. He fixed broken furniture and broken hearts. He never hurt anyone in his entire life. But his own sons, the children he raised, loved, and provided for, murdered him in cold blood for money. They watched him die in agony, then went home and planned to kill his beloved wife too. This isn't just murder. This is the ultimate betrayal of everything families should stand for. Mr. Blackwood's final speech tried to make David and Michael look like victims of gambling addiction who had made terrible mistakes. But nobody was buying it. The jury deliberated for only 3 hours. When they came back, the foreman stood up and read the verdict in a strong, clear voice. In the case of David Hayes, we find the defendant guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy. In the case of Michael Hayes, we find the defendant guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy. In the case of Sarah Hayes, we find the defendant guilty of conspiracy and accessory to murder. The courtroom exploded in cheers and applause. David and Michael sat stone-faced as the handcuffs were put back on their wrists. Sarah started crying, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of self-pity. The judge sentenced David and Michael to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Sarah got 25 years. As they were led away in chains, David looked back at me with pure hatred in his eyes. "This isn't over, old woman," he snarled. But I wasn't afraid of him anymore. "Yes, it is," I said calmly. "It's over, and justice has won." Officer Rodriguez walked me out of the courthouse, past all the reporters and cameras. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, "your husband would be so proud of you. You never gave up, even when you were scared. You made sure his killers faced justice." That night, I sat in Edward's workshop, surrounded by his tools and his memory. For the first time since he died, I felt at peace. "We did it, my love," I whispered to the wind chimes. "We got them. They'll never hurt anyone else ever again." The chimes rang softly in the evening breeze, and I could swear I heard Edward's voice one last time. "I love you, Margaret. Now live your life and be happy." 6 months after the trial ended, I stood in Edward's workshop, but it looked completely different now. Where there used to be workbenches and tools, there were comfortable chairs and a small kitchen. I had turned Edward's beloved workshop into something new, a safe place for people who needed help. The sign outside read, "The Edward Hayes Foundation for Victims of Family Crimes." It was my way of making sure Edward's memory lived on by helping other people who had been hurt by their own families, just like I had been. Sam Wilson was there with me that morning, hanging pictures on the wall, photos of Edward working in his shop, smiling at family dinners, holding my hand on our front porch. But now there were other photos too. Pictures of people we had helped, families we had brought back together, and victims who had found justice because of Edward's foundation. "Mrs. Hayes," Sam said, stepping back to look at the wall, "Edward would be amazed at what you've built here." I smiled, feeling proud and sad at the same time. He always said broken things could be made beautiful again. I guess that includes broken hearts too. The foundation had helped 23 families in just 6 months. There was Mrs. Peterson, whose grandson had been stealing her medicine money. There was Mr. Garcia, whose daughter had tried to steal his house by forging documents. And there was young Jenny Martinez, whose stepfather had been hurting her while her mother pretended not to see. Each person who came to us got the same thing I had needed: someone to believe them, someone to help them gather evidence, and someone to make sure justice was served. Officer Rodriguez had become our partner in all of this. He helped train other police officers to recognize when family members might be dangerous. He also helped us set up a special phone line that people could call when they felt scared of their own relatives. The hardest thing for people to understand, Officer Rodriguez told me, is that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones who want to hurt you the most. Your story helps them realize they're not alone. If this story has touched your heart and inspired you to believe in justice, please like this video to help us reach more people who need to hear this message. Share it with someone who believes that good always wins over evil in the end. And subscribe for more incredible true stories of courage, justice, and hope, because everyone deserves to know they're not alone in their fight for truth. Sam had become more than just the detective who helped me. He had become my dearest friend. We had coffee together every morning at 8 a.m. sharp, sitting in the same chairs where Edward and I used to plan our days. Sam would tell me about the new cases we were working on, and I would help him understand how to talk to scared, hurt people who didn't know who to trust. "You know, Mrs. Hayes," Sam said one morning, "when Edward first hired me, I thought this would be a simple case. Worried husband, probably nothing serious. I never imagined it would turn into something like this." "Edward always said God works in mysterious ways," I replied, sipping my coffee. Maybe this was all part of a bigger plan. The garden I had planted around the foundation was blooming beautifully. I had planted Edward's favorite flowers, sunflowers, roses, and the purple irises he always said reminded him of my eyes. But I had also planted a memorial garden with stones for every person we had helped find justice. People from town would stop by just to walk through the garden and read the inspirational quotes I had carved on wooden signs. "The truth will always find a way to shine through the darkness. Real family is about love, not blood. Even broken hearts can grow beautiful flowers." One afternoon, a young woman named Lisa came to see me. She was crying and shaking, and she reminded me so much of myself on that terrible day when I first realized my sons wanted to hurt me. "Mrs. Hayes," she whispered, "I think my husband is trying to poison me. He makes me special smoothies every morning, and after I drink them, I feel sick and dizzy for hours." But when I told my sister, she said I was being paranoid. I took Lisa's hands in mine, just like Edward used to do when I was scared. "Lisa, honey, you're not paranoid. You're smart. And you're brave for coming here. Tell me everything." We helped Lisa get medical tests that showed dangerous amounts of arsenic in her blood. Her husband had been slowly poisoning her to collect her life insurance money, just like Michael had poisoned Edward. But because Lisa was brave enough to ask for help, she lived. Her husband is now in prison for attempted murder. "You saved my life, Mrs. Hayes," Lisa told me at his trial. "If you hadn't believed me, if you hadn't helped me, I would be dead right now." Stories like Lisa's happened almost every week. The foundation was making a real difference, and I knew Edward was proud of what we had built in his memory. But the most surprising thing that happened was a letter I received 1 year after the trial. It was from Michael, written from his prison cell. "Mom," the letter said, "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need to tell you something.
I'm sorry.
Not sorry I got caught, but really, truly sorry for what I did to Dad. And what I almost did to you. Prison has given me a lot of time to think, and I realize now how evil David and I became. We stopped seeing you and Dad as people who loved us. We only saw you as money. That's not who you raised me to be. I know I can never make up for murdering Dad. I know you can never forgive me. But I want you to know that I think about him every day, and I cry about what I did. I wish I could take it all back. I heard about your foundation. Dad would be so proud of you for turning something terrible into something good. That's the woman he fell in love with, someone who makes beautiful things out of broken pieces. I don't expect you to write back. I don't deserve your love anymore. But I wanted you to know that the son you raised is still in here somewhere, and he's sorry. He's so sorry." I cried when I read that letter. Not because I forgave Michael, some things are too terrible to forgive, but because I realized that even in the darkest hearts, there might still be a tiny spark of goodness left. I never wrote back to Michael, but I did something else. I started a program at the foundation to help families heal after terrible crimes. Because sometimes, the people left behind need to find a way to move forward without carrying hatred in their hearts forever. David never wrote to me. Sam told me that David still claims he did nothing wrong, that Edward deserved to die for not giving them money. Some people, I learned, are just too broken to ever be fixed. Sarah got out of prison after serving 15 years of her 25-year sentence for good behavior. She moved far away and changed her name. I hope she learned something from her time in prison. I hope she never hurts anyone else. But I try not to think about them too much anymore. Instead, I think about Edward. Every evening at sunset, I sit on our front porch in the same chairs where we used to watch the day end together. I can feel him there with me, holding my hand, telling me about his day in heaven. Did I do good today, Edward? I ask the evening sky. And the wind chimes on the porch ring softly, like they're saying, "Yes, my dear Margaret. You did very, very good." I'm 71 years old now, 5 years older than I was when this whole nightmare began. My hair is whiter and my hands shake a little more than they used to. But my heart is stronger than it's ever been. The foundation has helped over 200 families now. We've prevented dozens of murders, stopped countless scams, and helped hundreds of people escape from dangerous family members. We've saved lives, and we've brought justice to people who thought they would never get it. Sam is still my partner in all of this, though he's officially retired from being a private detective. He jokes that working with me is a full-time job all by itself. "Mrs. Hayes," he said to me just last week, "you realize we've become famous, right? There are TV shows about our cases, books written about what happened to you and Edward. You're inspiring people all over the world." "Good," I said firmly. "If our story helps even one person realize that they don't have to let family members hurt them, then everything we went through is worth it." The most important thing I learned from this whole terrible, wonderful journey is that family isn't about blood. Family is about love, protection, and choosing to do what's right even when it's hard. Edward and I didn't have biological children who loved us, but we found a family anyway. Sam became the son I always wanted, loyal, protective, and good. Officer Rodriguez became like a nephew, always checking on me and making sure I was safe. The people we helped through the foundation became our extended family, connected by shared experiences and healing. Real family doesn't try to hurt you for money. Real family doesn't lie to you or try to control you. Real family stands up for you when you can't stand up for yourself. I still miss Edward every single day. I still make his favorite coffee in the morning and set out 2 cups by habit. I still turn to tell him something funny and feel sad when I remember he's not there. But I've learned that love doesn't die when people die. Edward's love for me is still alive in every person we help, every family we save, every criminal we stop. His love lives on in the garden, in the foundation, in the wind chimes that ring on quiet evenings. And I know that someday, when my own time on earth is finished, Edward will be waiting for me. We'll sit on a heavenly front porch, hold hands, and watch the sunset together again. But until then, I have work to do. There are still people who need help, still families who need saving, still justice that needs to be served. Edward always said that broken things could be made beautiful again.
He was right about that.
And he was right about something else, too. Love really is the strongest force in the universe. It's stronger than greed, stronger than evil, and stronger than death itself. If you're reading this story and you're scared of someone in your own family, please remember, you are not alone. You are not crazy. You deserve to be safe and loved and protected. Find your Sam Wilson. Find your Officer Rodriguez. Find people who will believe you and help you. Because everyone deserves to live in a world where family means love, not danger. Everyone deserves their own happily ever after. Even people like me who thought their story was over when it was really just beginning. The end. Margaret Hayes continues to run the Edward Hayes Foundation from her home. If you or someone you know is being hurt by a family member, please reach out for help. There are people who care, people who will believe you, and people who will fight for your safety. Your story doesn't have to end in tragedy. Sometimes it can end in justice, healing, and hope. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if this story moved you. Your support helps us tell more stories of courage and hope. Together, we can make sure no one fights alone.